Welcome everyone to our webinar on how to expand your business into a franchise. My name is Paul Loccisano and I'm a Senior Associate in LegalVision's franchise and leasing teams. Before we begin, a couple of quick housekeeping items. You'll receive the recordings and slides in your email. Submit your questions in the Q&A box and we'll answer them at the end. And please complete the feedback survey after the webinar. For the next 48 hours, you're eligible for a free consultation with LegalVision to discuss how we can help your business. Provide your contact details in the survey at the end of this webinar. So the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to do a little poll. Let me just get that set up. Okay, so the poll is set up. So the question for the poll is, what is your main reason for exploring franchising? Are we finding the right company structure for growth, setting up key franchising systems and processes, protecting the brand with trademarks, understanding legal documents, or just exploring options, no immediate plans? So give everyone a little bit of time to fill that out. You can see we've got one answer so far. Okay, great. So I'll pause it there. Oh, we might have one more. Okay, we'll pause it there. Great. So we had, understanding the legal documents required and just exploring options, no immediate plans. And both good reasons for exploring franchising. So I hope the content in this webinar will answer some of those questions or initial feelings that you had about it. Okay. So today we'll be discussing trademarks and registration process, company structure and franchises, the importance of systems and processes, the importance of an operations manual, the key legal documents and GDPR considerations, and any questions that you have. So let's take a look at trademarks. So a trademark is a word, phrase, or logo that is connected to and used to identify and distinguish your business. You can think of things like the classic is the Golden Arches or I'm Loving It, so aka McDonald's, and brand names like Coca-Cola. They're obvious examples of protected trademarks. A key thing to note is that a company name, so the name that you use to register with Companies House, or a trading name, just a name that you might use to represent your business, are not the same thing as a registered trademark. They won't offer you the same level of protection. And generally, we recommend that all businesses, whether you intend to franchise or not, go and register your trademarks. The importance of registering a trademark is that it gives you an exclusive right that helps prevent or take action against others who use your name or logo and who are trying to benefit from your established reputation and goodwill. So for that reason, a registered trademark is valuable since franchisees are paying to use your name and logo and benefit from your established reputation and goodwill. Franchisees always want to know that you have registered and protected your trademarks. The other thing to note is that trademark registration lasts for 10 years and can be renewed indefinitely. But what's the trademark registration process? So when you engage LegalVision, we do a risk assessment to determine the likelihood of the trademark being successfully registered. We'll look for other registered trademarks that might be the same or similar and advise you on whether your trademark application is likely to be successful. Once filed with the Intellectual Property Office, the IPO will examine the trademark, provide you with an examination report, which will detail the IPO's position and potential oppositions. Then the trademark will be advertised and there will be an opposition period of 2 months. The whole process takes around 4 months for the trademark to be registered. However, protection is backdated to the application filing date. And a key thing to note about trademarks is that they are jurisdiction specific. So registration that we're talking about now is for the UK only. Separate applications are required for other countries, which LegalVision can assist with. The next one, let's take a look at what we recommend is the company structure for franchising. So we recommend the following corporate structure for franchisors. One, that you have a holding company to own the marks, the trademarks, and other intellectual property you have. A company to act as franchisor, to enter into the franchise agreements with franchisees, so an operating entity. And then if the business operates from premises and you want to hold the main lease and then sublet to franchisees, we also recommend a separate leasing company to enter into those leases. Usually the founders will be shareholders of the holding company, and the franchising and leasing companies will then be subsidiaries of that holding company. This structure is important because it protects you and your assets. Further, the holding company should not trade or enter into contracts with any third parties because that protects your IP. The franchising company's primary purpose will be to enter into the franchise agreements. So generally, the franchising company won't have any assets. So if there's a dispute with a franchisee, for example, and the franchising company is sued, you've got a layer of protection from assets being put at risk. That's the same thing for the leasing company. So the leasing company's sole purpose will be to enter into leases that are used for the franchised business. The leasing company generally won't have any assets. So if there's a dispute with a landlord, like outstanding rent, and the leasing company is sued by that landlord, there won't be any assets to be put at risk, and sometimes the leasing company can then be wound up if that's necessary. Here's a diagram of what the ideal structure looks like. I'll give you a second to take a look at that. And then we're going to move on to looking at systems and processes. Okay. So refining our systems and processes when we're moving into franchising. What are your systems and processes? These are the ways in which the business currently operates, and it also refers to the ways in which your franchise network will operate. An example of a system is point of sale software that you might use in your business. And an example of a process is how you normally deal with a new customer or lead on a daily basis. When franchising, it's important to ensure that your systems and processes are clear, they're refined. This is so that you can have consistency in your business model, no matter who's running the business. And while some franchisors give thought to how the franchise network will run after they franchise, it's important to consider this prior to the franchising process, as it sets your network up for success from the beginning. So here are some of the systems and processes you might consider streamlining before you franchise. So you've got point of sale software, reporting such as sales data, profitability or accounting obligations, payment obligations, franchise fees, ordering of products and equipment in the business, customer relationship data and procedures, employee onboarding and documentation, and all of those software systems, intranets for franchise-related questions or for the operations manual, which we're going to go into in a sec. The importance of ensuring that these are replicable is, it's important to get these processes right. It's because they're going to be replicated in the network. The ultimate goal of a franchise network is to have multiple franchisees who have taken your model and are equipped to do the same thing in a different location. Replication is a lot easier for you and your franchisees when you have clear and established systems and processes. And that's why it's important to think about it from the beginning, because everyone's on the same page, you know how to manage your growing network, and it allows for iteration and evolution as you go without rewriting the playbook as you go. So let's turn to one of the other key aspects of franchising, which is the operations manual, which you may have heard of. So the operations manual relates back to what we were just discussing regarding systems and processes. This is a document or a system or an intranet that takes all of your know-how on how to successfully operate your business and summarizes it in a clear and concise way. The operations manual is therefore crucial to expansion as a franchise network, as it provides all of the franchisees with the information they need to successfully replicate the business. It's also a highly confidential document, as effectively it's a playbook containing all of your key operations information. So what does the operations manual typically contain? So it contains a lot more than this, but it will contain information such as how to handle customers, including dealing with complaints, who your approved suppliers are or your approved product list, depending on how you operate as a franchise, information on how to onboard employees and often employee policies, and resources which the franchisee may require in the operation of their business or as being part or being as part of being a franchisee. And like I was saying, this is a live document, so it's important that you've got the operations manual before you start franchising, but it's something that you'll refine and develop as you grow as a network. So a key question then is, how do you prepare one? To begin preparing an operations manual, you should start looking at all the systems and processes you have in place within your own business. Take all that information stored in your mind and put it all down on paper. That's how you get started. But the best operations manuals are drafted by franchise consultants who work with you by discussing these aspects of the business and help you to summarize them within a detailed and official operations manual. Most of the operations manual isn't a legal document, doesn't contain legal information. That's what the franchise agreement is for. But there may be some policies or information in the operations manual which have legal implications, employment, privacy, areas like that. So we always recommend working with a consultant to get a proper operations manual drafted, but then you would have your lawyer review the sections which relate specifically to legal obligations. So like I was saying, employment contracts, disputes, privacies are the areas in the operations manual that have a legal flavor to them. Another question that we often get asked is, when do you actually provide the operations manual to franchisees? So given it contains a lot of confidential information, there are really only a few different options for when you provide it. You're either providing it before they've signed the franchise agreement or after they've signed the franchise agreement. And there's some key considerations around how you handle that. So lots of franchisees, talking from the other side of the fence, will want to see the operations manual before they sign the franchise agreement, purely because the franchise agreement will refer to the operations manual a lot. And processes and costs and things like that are going to be contained within it. If you do need to share it before they become a franchisee, you should only do it once they've signed a non-disclosure agreement, or the other approach is by only allowing them to inspect the document but not have a copy. Risks involved with obviously giving them that information unless they're bound by some level of confidentiality. Once they've signed the franchise agreement, though, it's with the franchise agreement containing restraints and confidentiality obligations, then they can have a copy, but they have to hand that copy back when they cease becoming a franchisee. This is assuming it's a physical document. If it's an intranet or something like that, you would revoke access once they cease becoming a franchisee. And the franchise agreement talks about returning the manual and putting obligations on that. So the second method, after they've signed the franchise agreement, is the one that offers the most security and the one that we recommend to our franchisors. Let's take a closer look at the legal documents for franchising in the UK. So The main legal document a UK franchise needs is the franchise agreement, and that's entered into between you as the franchisor and each of your franchisees. You might have also come across the phrase disclosure document or disclosure statement. UK regulations don't require any particular form of disclosure, so most UK franchisors don't provide one unless they're a member of a professional organisation that requires certain disclosures to be made. If you do get a disclosure document, though, it can be quite useful because it should give you some key particulars about that franchise system, how it's been operating, whether it's faced any litigation, elements like that. So then in turning to the franchise agreement itself, so this outlines the commercial and legal details of the relationship. That can include the types of fees payable, when they're payable, so royalties, other fees like marketing contributions, things like that. Who the people involved in the franchise business will be. So it'll outline the actual franchisee, which might be a company. There might be principals who are responsible for management. They might also be guarantors. How leases or premises will be held. So this is really relevant if you're a premises-based franchise. Think of like a food retail outlet. You're going to want to control fit out. You're going to want to control the selection process. The franchise agreement talks to all that. It'll also have the obligations of franchisee and franchisor. So most of the obligations falling on the franchisee, of course. Franchisors, their obligations are usually around maybe ensuring that the system stays current, but mostly around training and support. It can also include the areas of law that the franchisee needs to abide by. You might have a specific regulated industry. So there's lots of care franchises, so CQC regulation, getting DBS checks, those sorts of things may be included. It will also outline the territory, whether or not that's exclusive or not, exclusivity being the market standard in the UK. And that territory might be by reference to postcode, it might be referenced to a map area. That will all be in the franchise agreement. And then it contains a whole host of other provisions like restraints, audits, training, marketing, termination, and how termination and consequences of termination. So because of all this, it's really important that you have a franchise agreement that reflects how your business operates in terms of how it regulates franchisees on the ground. And like I said, it will link to your operations manual, and together these documents need to give the franchisees the information necessary to know what their obligations, expectations, and responsibilities are. The other side that we always recommend franchisors look at is contracts. So all of their contracts is kind of an umbrella phrase here, but this is a review of all of the existing contracts that are integral to growth and will cause franchisors legal issues if they aren't considered before starting a network. So some of the questions you would be asking is whether supply, manufacture, distribution arrangements are actually adequate to meet the demands of a growing network. Or even do you have contracts in place? So if you have a key supplier and there's no contract and they're expected to supply to the entire network, how will you regulate things if that situation goes wrong, if demand can't be met, for example? Are there customer terms and conditions in place that protect the brand and delivery of services? So you might be rolling out templates that franchisees use. Are you providing template employment agreements and policies? And then additionally, do you have your own employment agreements up to date? And are you hiring new staff to cope with the expansion to becoming a franchisor? New and different roles are often something that needs to be taken into account. Are you retaining or processing any special kinds of information? So I mentioned care franchises before. They might be processing particular kinds of information, and therefore understanding your data protection obligations is going to be really important, and how you communicate what the franchisee's obligations are through your operations manual. So these are just some examples, but these are all important to have tidied up before you franchise. Mainly because issues within the network are the primary reason for franchisees becoming disgruntled or diverting from required standards, including where it's actually impossible for them to comply because the support doesn't exist. Like I mentioned, if they can't get supply of a key product, they might just need to go elsewhere in order to continue servicing customers. It goes without saying that all of your legal documents should be drafted properly and with legal assistance for several reasons, but mostly importantly, so they reflect the model and system and that your franchisees are clear on relationship expectations from the beginning. Now let's turn to the GDPR. So the GDPR is another important aspect for UK franchisors. Franchisors need to ensure that they comply with with data protection laws, so with the GDPR, when they're handling personal data. This might be when you're collecting personal data, such as the names and addresses of franchisees, but it can also be when you have access to end customer personal data, like through databases for the franchise network, centralized websites, things like that. As a franchisor, it's not sufficient to leave GDPR compliance up to your franchisees. You do need to have processes for your franchisees to follow in terms of how personal data is collected, stored, and used. If you expect your franchisees to share personal data with you, for example, for marketing purposes, then you need a lawful basis for sharing that information. One of the other things that you'll need to consider is, so people whose personal data is subject to the GDPR have rights to do what's called data subject access requests. So you'll need to think about who's going to be responsible for handling any of those kinds of requests. So if the franchise operates from a centralized website, for example, and that website is managed by you, it's fairly likely that a customer, even if they've dealt with a franchisee, might reach out to you to exercise those GDPR rights. But in order to comply with that access request, you might require the assistance of the franchisee. So it's important to set out in advance what the process is to ensure that the franchise network as a whole is compliant with the GDPR and who is responsible for what. And the level of complexity, so the franchise agreement will include some GDPR and data protection provisions. It will include protections for franchisors on that. And then you would have the requirements on franchisees contained in your operations manual. The level of complexity that you would need around those provisions is going to largely depend on what type of business you are, what type of information you're collecting, whether or not you're acting as joint controllers with the franchisee, who's processing information, and whether or not you're engaging various sub-processes or use different software elements to also look through customer data or other data. So all of those factors are going to be important things to consider depending on what your industry is and how your business operates. And then, not to be alarming, but the regulatory bodies do impose large fines for businesses that fail to comply with their GDPR obligations. Okay, so that concludes the main part of our webinar. You might find our publication useful, so managing a UK franchise network. You might also be interested in our upcoming event, which is Privacy Law in 2025, what your business needs to know. We'll answer your questions shortly. While you submit them though, we'll take a minute to tell you about LegalVision's membership. So by becoming a LegalVision member, your business gets unlimited access to our full team of 100 plus specialist lawyers for all your business's usual legal needs. It's like having your own in-house counsel for a fraction of the cost. Our team can assist you with unlimited document drafting and reviewing of business contracts, unlimited legal advice consultations, and unlimited domestic trademark registration, and much more. As a LegalVision member, you won't worry about the cost of lawyers ever again. Think of it as having your own in-house counsel. We'll take care of all the business as usual legal work, so you can focus on running your own business. And if you are in-house counsel, we also offer a dedicated service to manage your high volume business as usual legal tasks. So to learn more about how membership or desk extension can help you, request a free consultation when the survey appears at the end of this webinar. And now we're going to answer some of your questions. Now we did have one question. Let me pull it up. So the first question that we've got is, how do you ensure that your franchisee does not say thank you and walk away after all of the training and knowledge sharing and become your competitor in times when enforcing legal documents is so complicated, costly, and not worth the effort and pain? So that is a very good question, and it's something that we get asked quite a lot, actually. It's a bit of a difficult one to answer, but you can only risk of a disgruntled franchisee so far. If you're right at the start, there's a few things to consider would be having them sign the franchise agreement like we were talking before you share confidential information, because that's going to give you the most protection right from the get-go. But it's really important to have a good selection process for franchisees. So it's almost like an interview. Well, it is like an interview, but you have to know what you're looking for, and you have to be confident that this person will be able to achieve that. And then it's a case of nurturing them through that training process. So you want to make sure that the training you've developed is top notch, and it's going to give them everything they need to be successful in the role. That way you're removing elements that would make that franchisee feel like they haven't had support or are disgruntled. The flip side to that is making sure that if you are franchising, that your franchise system is competitive. So you do have a genuine competitive edge when it comes to what you're offering, because one of the things that franchisees become disgruntled about is where they feel like they don't need to pay royalties for the type of service they're offering. So that's all. Is there a unique offering? Is it franchisable? Those are questions that come into play. So all of those elements are going to be considerations in terms of whether a franchisee is suitable, how successful are they likely to be, do they have the budget to actually become a franchisee, all of those questions. But ultimately, sometimes you can't know these things in advance, and terminating an early franchise agreement becomes a reality, unfortunately. Let's see if we had any other questions. Yeah, can't see any other questions. Did anyone have any other questions before we wrap up? Okay, no problem. Well, that's all the time that we have for today. So submit your details in the survey at the end for assistance with any questions that you might have had that you didn't get a chance to answer, that you didn't get a chance to raise, which we can then answer. And to learn more about our membership, how our membership can help you, so that's that survey at the end. And while this is a free webinar, we value your feedback. So please complete the 30-second survey at the end. And otherwise, thanks for joining us.